Glory to Jesus Christ, and welcome to St. Cyril Methodius Ukrainian Orthodox Church in downtown Madison, Wisconsin. I'm Father Gregory, the pastor. It's Sunday, June 1st, the Sunday of the Fathers of the First Ecumenical Council. Back in the late 90s, just after seminary and before I was ordained to the priesthood, I worked for a while as a therapist. And one of the things I noticed, and I had noticed this before when I had worked in different mental health agencies, is the tendency that we sometimes have to identify the person with their symptoms, and worse, to identify the disease with the symptoms. When that happens, we assume that simply alleviating the distress heals the disease. Something like that happens as well in the spiritual life. We see the symptoms of sin, and we assume that in alleviating or removing the symptom, that somehow we've now cured the underlying illness. But that's really not the case. In fact, when we do that, we fall into a certain kind of moralism or legalism. Part of what brings this to mind is a reflection by Sister Vasa on Facebook on the First Ecumenical Council, and her comment just in passing that there are some 20 disciplinary canons to the First Ecumenical Council, but that in the Church's liturgical life, we remember not the disciplinary canons, but the dogmatic teaching that the Son is truly God and that God has truly become man in Jesus Christ. When we focus on the canons of the Church, or when we focus in a more general sense on morality, we risk confusing symptoms and disease. The fact of the matter is that in the spiritual life, as in the physical life, as in our psychological life, a symptom can have many causes. One really quick example, I worked with adolescents, with teenagers. And sometimes these kids were, frankly, just bratty. In one context, a bratty kid is just that. He's a bratty kid and needs to be reprimanded or disciplined in some way. But many of the kids that I worked with were bratty not because they were proud or arrogant, though often pride and arrogance was part of the mix, but because they had been abused, they had been mistreated. It was very important for me to keep in mind that the behavior that in one context would be a sign just of being bratty and spoiled, in this context was often the sign of abuse. I needed to be careful that I did not equate the symptom with the disease, even though the symptoms could be the result of many different underlying illnesses, many different underlying psychological illnesses. It's the same with the spiritual life. Sometimes people will come to me and they say that they overeat or this or that, but on further examination, it becomes clear that the problem isn't gluttony, for example, but that they are sad and trying to compensate by eating or by drinking or by sex or whatever it is. It's important that we understand the illness that the symptom is pointing us towards. Because if we don't do that, we risk applying the wrong medicine. We risk causing more harm than we want. We end up causing more harm than good. What about you in your spiritual life? How prone are you to confuse symptom and disease? How frequently do you assume that your sin is simply a sign of rebellion rather than a failed attempt to find God? That's for consideration. Well, like I said, today is Sunday, June 1st, the Feast of the Fathers of the First Ecumenical Council. And I hope if you're here in the Madison area, you'll join us for liturgy at 9:30 at St. Cyril Methodius Ukrainian Orthodox Church, 1020 Regent Street in downtown Madison. If you're not in the Madison area, maybe try to find an Orthodox church where you are and attend liturgy. But whatever you do today, however you spend the morning and the rest of the day, I hope God blesses you. I hope you have a very good day, and I hope to talk to you again sometime soon. All right, take care. God bless you, and bye-bye.